All right. Namaste to everybody. We welcome you. I hope that you will come and be a part of and enjoy some time together. We're on a journey here, and I know that there are many people that are on a journey looking for an answer, uh, and so I think it really does bring to light that all of us, as you will learn in the metaphysic realm, that we are all one drop of the ocean. We are as much the ocean as the whole is, and that's uh, that's really a quite overwhelming and amazing concept. Uh, so much is going on, and as I shared in the past, it appears to me that there is actually, I think that we often like things one way or another because that's simple. And in reality, there are not only four or five or six, there's a myriad of things that are actually going on right now. And it may end up being very difficult for many people to make sense of it because on one side, you hear that it's this, and then on another side you hear that it's that, and then on another side you hear that it's this, and another side you hear that it's that. And so if you are one of those ones that are in a perplexed state about what does it all mean, then welcome to the jungle. uh, I would hope, I think anybody who has a mind and thinks is in that state. And so we're looking at, and I'm so thankful that Source led me here, which is always the case, or at least should always be the case for us, because we are an ongoing continuation of a war that is probably 50,000 years old, 100,000 years old, and the war is between what a person individually perceives to be reality, which could be deemed as their reality, and then what is reality. And oftentimes it's found that people's reality are not at all reality. And so the journey really isn't just I'm looking for reality. The journey should be looking for the true reality. And I do believe that we're closer to that than maybe many people that have come before us. Although there have been many people who have experienced the mystical side. Uh, Helena is in the middle of a constant battle. She's fighting with, on the one side, the pseudo spiritual people, uh, i.e., those of theology, those of religion, and then on the other side, she's fighting on the other side with those of there is no theology, that everything is literal. And the more that I read, and I've done quite a bit of reading, but the more that I read, the more I see the battle and really what an amazing person that she was. As far as the war that she waged on her own, I guess I recognize that I'm a kindred spirit with her. She was a she was a she was a pigeon, if you would. I've said this about myself for a long time that I do things that nobody else did because nobody else had the nerve to do it, and she is very much that way, and so tonight we're going to find out as we get into the Isis Unveiled. This is going to be one of the most profound journeys that there is. The other stuff that I'm reading that she wrote around this every week is to fill in and bring clarity, and it's doing that. And sometimes the bad thing about the truth is that when you find it, uh, it's not always easy to swallow. It's not always easy to deal with, and so we have a war similar to hers, and the one she was in is still going on. But we have a war now going on between, if you would, the spiritual revelation, which is, if I could, the new religion, and the new version of the scientific revelation. And I see, just as Source brought me into Christianity so I would know what wasn't true about it, it seems as if he's yet doing again. And you'll learn from spiritual people that if you're conscious and if you're thoughtful, mindful, you'll begin to look for patterns in everything in your life. And yet here again is another pattern of the same cycle starting all over, just in a different place about a different thing. And so for us, it's quite huge. I will say to those, because of the term occult, there have been those who struggle with that. You struggle with that because of the definition that you have of what that means, and that revelation was imparted to you through Christianity. And so there's you might ask yourself, could it really possibly be true if you begin to look at it, see, and understand who Yeshua truly was? Is it possible that he was an occultist? And if you simply take a look at and see that anyone who does, the term she likes to use is phenomena, I certainly understand why, because it takes all of the other, or at least many of the connotations out that would be used if you said magic, if you said occultism, if you said miracles. All of those words invoke thoughts, and sometimes the thoughts that words invoke are the thing you need to get away from the most. And but you have to ask yourself, he's written into the scriptures as telling us that whatever signs he did, we're supposed to be doing them also. And for those of you who know me and have any kind of consciousness, you certainly know that I've struggled with that for a long time, because I can't make sense of this one who came to save humanity, and yet not one person that I know except my grandfather is a believer. I only know two believers, myself and my grandfather. They're the only two I've ever seen do anything supernatural. And Paul tells us that the signs have to follow. Yeshua tells us that the signs have to follow. And so it gets very disconcerting sometimes, because if that is the thing that's being spoken negatively of, and yet it's the thing that he required us to, the good news is that if you understood anything that Yeshua was saying, then that would be your heart's thrive anyways. And so, if it's not, then there's your answer as to why you're not manifesting, because you don't have any desire to. And all of this that comes in the spirit realm is all driven off of your desire. So if you desire to be lazy, you will be lazy. If you desire to be awake, you will be awake eventually. And so that's, but it's not something that comes from the mind. And I think that's part of the reason that I needed to go there. This totally has nothing to do with your mind as far as we think of thinking. But it has everything to do with your mind in the spirit realm. And so we left off last week with chapter 2. You'll kind of see when I get in here, because she kind of jumps into the middle of this. She's struggling. She's going through a dialogue where scientists are attacking the phenomena and saying it's not real because they can't see it. Well, we get to live in a time when some of these things, science is shifting. Only the problem is that science went from here to here, and we're still here. And we were here when they were here. And so it kind of changes the position of where people are at, but the same struggle still exists. So you'll see what I'm saying. Chapter 2, pride. Where wit fails, steps into our defense. So where your wit fails, it steps into our defense. Pride does. And fills up all the mighty void of sense. So when your wit, that could be characterized as your ability to think, the quickness of your mind, your ability to think, those processes. And so what the Pope said is that when you have no ability to think, then pride will be sure to fill in the blanks for you. I don't know if you guys know it or not, but the Bible clearly tells us what the place of pride is in any level. If we really believed, and we don't, but if America did believe anything that had anything to do with Christianity, the last thing that would ever come off of the lips of a human in America would be anything with us being prideful. It would have nothing to do with pride, and everything that we do is about pride. And so it very much exposes, as you begin to see truth, then the problem that you'll find if you continue on this journey wherever you're at is eventually you will begin to see truth. And the problem with that is that once you see it, you can't ever not see it. And so, so this was from Bulwer, but why should the operations of nature be changed? There may be a deeper philosophy than we dream of, a philosophy that discovers the secrets of nature but does not alter by penetrating them its course. And that was Bulwer. You're going to hear plenty of these people. They were very prominent in the time that she was writing in the early 1900s. So don't get hung up on that. It was somebody somewhere. I mean, the Pope, it doesn't really matter which one it was the Pope. And so she writes, is it enough for man to know that he exists? Is it enough to be formed a human being to enable him to deserve the appellation of man? It's a question. It is our decided impression and conviction that to become a genuine spiritual entity, which that designation implies, man must first create himself anew, so to speak. In other words, thoroughly eliminate from his mind and spirit not only the dominating influence of selfishness and other impurity, but also the infection of superstition and prejudice. And so there's a mouthful there. There's a mouthful there because part of what she's talking about is the ego. And to that end, how many are actually even actively desirous to change and to dominate the ego that is dominating them is open for anyone's debate. Certainly that will manifest inevitably. And so we will get to see that. So not only the dominating influence of selfishness and other impurity, but also the infection of superstition and prejudice. The latter is far different from what we commonly term antipathy or sympathy. We are at first that powerful current of magnetism which emanates from ideas as well as from physical bodies. And by this we are surrounded and finally prevented through moral cowardice, fear of public opinion, from stepping out of it. It is rare that men regard a thing in either its true or false light, accepting the conclusion by the free action of their own judgment. Quite the reverse. The conclusion is more commonly reached by blindly adopting the opinion current at the hour amongst those with whom they associate. A church member will not pay an absurdly high price for his pew any more than a materialist will go twice to listen to Mr. Huckley's talk on evolution because they think that it is right to do so, but merely because Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so have done it, and these personages are, you can fill the blanks in, the S and the S, and I'll leave that to your mind to fill those in. So the same holds good with everything else. If psychology had had its Darwin, the descent of man as regards moral qualities might have been found inseparably linked with that of his physical form. Society in its servile condition suggests to intelligent observer of its mimicry a kinship between simia and human beings, even more striking than an exhibited in the external marks pointed out by the great anthropologist. The many varieties of the ape, mocking presentments of ourselves, appear to have been evolved on purpose to supply a certain class of expensively dressed persons with the material for genealogical trees. Science is daily and rapidly moving towards the great discoveries in chemistry, in physics, in organology, and anthropology. Learned men ought to be free from preconceptions and prejudices of every kind. Yet although thought and opinion are now free, scientists are still the same men as of old. An utopian dreamer is he who thinks that man ever changes with the evolution and development of new ideas. The soil may be well fertilized and made to yield with every year a greater and a greater, better variety of fruit. But dig a little deeper than the stratum required for the crop, and the earth is the same, will be found in the subsoil as was there before the first furrow was turned. Not many years ago, the person who questioned the infallibility of some theological dogma was branded at once an iconoclast and an infidel. Vae victis. Science has conquered, but in its turn, the victor claims the same infallibility, though it equally fails to prove it's right. Tempora mutantur et nos mutamur in illis. The saying of the good old Lotharius applies to the case. Nevertheless, we feel as if we had some right to question the high priest of science. For many years, we have watched the development and growth of that apple of discord, modern spiritualism. Familiar with its literature both in Europe and America, we have closely and eagerly witnessed its interminable controversies and compared its contradictory hypotheses. Many educated men and women, heterodox spiritualists of course, have tried to fathom the protean phenomena. The only result was that they came to the following conclusion. Whatever may be the reason of these constant failures, whether such are to be laid at the door of the investigators themselves or of the secret force at work, it is at least proved that in proportion as the psychological manifestations increase in frequency and variety, the darkness surrounding their origin becomes more impenetrable. That phenomena are actually witnessed, mysterious in their nature, generally and perhaps wrongly termed spiritual, it is now idle to deny. Allowing a large discount for clever fraud, what remains is quite serious enough to demand the careful scrutiny of science. Et pour se mouve. The sentence spoken ages since has passed into the category of household words. The courage of Galileo is not now required to fling into the face of the Academy. Psychological phenomena are already on the offensive. And we see that. So she was already at the beginning. They were already starting the stuff that we see that's really more mainstream. I mean, to have a medium that was actually functioning and wasn't a hoax was quite something. Edgar Casey had people travel from all over the world. Edgar Casey had at least 2 presidents that came to his little farmhouse to ask him for insight about running this country. So to say that these things have no power would be quite ludicrous and just prove ignorance. On the other side, I think that it goes along with what's happening now. Now we're moving kind of, well, there's a growth of so-called spiritualism, but that's going to burn out because it's not real. It's not based, it doesn't even ask the questions. It just simply tells mindless people to be mindless. And so it's quite difficult. And so they use clichéic statements like, you go to your spirit guides. And the mass majority of people I've talked to that have gone to their spirit guides never heard a response. And if they did hear a response, if they judged what was responded to them, they may have very well found that the archons were yet again at play. And so they love to play with humans and the mind. They're very good at it. They've had thousands and thousands of years. And so many educated men and women, heterodox spiritual, of course, have tried to fathom the protean phenomena. The only result was that they came to the following conclusion. Whatever may be the reason of these constant failures, whether such are to be laid at the door of the investigators or of the secret force at work, it is at least proved that in proportion as the psychological manifestations increase in frequency and variety, the darkness surrounding their origin becomes more impenetrable. And so for us, we see that. We see that many people, although they may even be able to believe that mediums are right and they don't think of them as being witches or whatever the case may be, the real difficulty of that, because it's still so hidden. And it doesn't, the more that a person does or the more that a person manifests, the more mysterious how they did what they did becomes. And science is moving towards that with the quantum stuff that we have going on. Is you now are starting to see factions of this that really are starting to meld together. That what used to be you can access the thing through spirituality, there's almost the overtones now of accessing it through given patterns and things that you can do. If you do this, you will manifest. And so even if the words are true, the spirit and the understanding in most cases doesn't exist. And that's really a huge part of this. Yeshua talked about that. And so the position assumed by modern scientists is that even though the occurrence of certain mysterious phenomena in the presence of the mediums be a fact, there is no proof that they are not due to some abnormal nervous condition of those individuals. I love that. The possibility that they may be produced by returning human spirits need not be considered until the other question is decided. Little exception can be taken to the position. Unquestionably, the burden of proof rests upon those who assert the agency of spirits. If the scientists would grapple with the subject in good faith, showing an earnest desire to solve the perplexing mystery instead of treating it with undignified and unprofessional contempt, they would be open to no censor. True, the great majority of spiritual communications are calculated to disgust investigators or even moderate intelligence. Even when genuine, they are trivial, commonplace, and often vulgar. During the past 20 years, we have received through various mediums messages purporting to be Shakespeare, Byron, Franklin, Peter the Great, Napoleon, Josephine, and even from Voltaire. The general impression made upon us was that the French conqueror and his consort seemed to have forgotten how to spell words correctly. Shakespeare and Byron had become chronic inebriates, and Voltaire had turned into an imbecile. Who can blame men trained to habits of exactitude, or even simply well-educated persons, for hastily concluding that when so much palpable fraud lies upon the surface, there could hardly be truth if they should go to the bottom? The huckstering about pompous names attached to idiotic communications has given the scientific stomach such an indigestion that it cannot assimilate even the great truth which lies on the telegraphics plateau of this ocean of psychological phenomena. They judge by its surface, covered with froth and scum, but they might with equally propriety deny that there is any clear water in the depths of the sea when an oily scum was floating upon the surface. Therefore, if on one hand we cannot very well blame them for stepping back at the first sight of what seems really repulsive, we do, and have a right to censor them for their unwillingness to explore deeper. Neither pearls nor cut diamonds are to be found lying loose on the ground, and these persons act unwisely as would a professional diver who would reject an oyster on account of its filthy and slimy appearance, when by opening it he might find a precious pearl inside the shell. Even the just and severe rebukes of some of their leading men are of no avail, and the fear on the part of men of science to investigate such an unpopular subject seems to have now become a general panic. The phenomena chase the scientist, and the scientists run away from the phenomena. Now, I would like to say things have shifted since her time, and while I won't say all of it is benevolent, that is to say, it's probably about a 50-50 mix of scientists who their life's journey is to prove that the spirit realm is not existent, and probably the other half are in the business that they're in, if you would, of trying to prove that the spirit realm is significant and does exist. And so that's the kind of the place where humanity seems to stay. And so the phenomena chase the scientist, and the scientists run away from the phenomena. Very pointedly remarks M.A.N. Aksakoff in an able article on mediumism in the St. Petersburg Scientific Committee. The attitude of this body of professors towards the subject which they have pledged themselves to investigate was throughout simply disgraceful. Their premature and prearranged report was so evidently partial and inconclusive as to call out a scornful protest even from unbelievers. The inconsistency of the logic of our learned gentlemen against the philosophy of spiritualism proper is admirably pointed out by Professor John Fiske, one of their own body, in a recent philosophical work, The Unseen World, while showing that from the very definition of the terms matter and spirit, the existence of spirit cannot be demonstrated to the senses, and that thus no theory is amenable to scientific test. He deals a severe blow at his colleagues in the following lines. The testimony in such a case, he says, must under conditions of the present life be forever inaccessible. It lies wholly outside the range of experience. However abundant it may be, we cannot expect to meet it. And accordingly, our failure to produce it does not raise even the slightest presumption against our theory. When conceived in this way, the belief in the future life is without a scientific support, but at the same time, it is placed beyond the need of scientific support, and the range of discovery can in any way impugn. It is a belief which is in no sense irrational, and which may be logically entertained without in the least affecting our scientific habit of mind or influencing our scientific conclusions. If now, he adds, men of science will accept the position that spirit is not matter, nor governed by the laws of matter, and refrain from speculations concerning it restricted by their knowledge of material things. They will withdraw what is to men of religion at present their principal cause of irritation. But they will do no such thing. They feel incensed at the brave, loyal, and highly commendable surrender of such superior men as Wallace, and refuse to accept even the prudent and restricted policy of Mr. Crookes. No other claim is advanced for a hearing of the opinions contained in the present work than that they are based upon many years' study of both ancient magic and its modern form, spiritualism. The former, even now, when phenomena of the same nature have become so familiar to all, is commonly set down as clever jugglery. The latter, when overwhelming evidence precludes the possibility of truthfully declaring its charlatanry, is denominated as universal hallucination. Many years of wandering among heathen and Christian magicians, occultists, and mesmerizers, and the tutti quanti of white and black art ought to be sufficient, we think, to give us a certain right to feel competent to take a practical view of this doubted and very complicated question. We have associated with the Fakers, the holy men of India, and seen them when in intercourse with the Petries. We have watched the proceedings and modus operandi of the howling and dancing dervishes, held friendly communications with the marabouts of European and Asiatic Turkey, and the serpent charmers of Damascus and Benares, have but few secrets that we have not had the fortune to study. Therefore, when scientists who have never had an opportunity of living amongst these Oriental jugglers, and can judge at the best, but superficially, tell us that there is nothing in their performances but mere tricks of prestidigitation, we cannot help feeling a profound regret for such hasty conclusions. That such pretentious claims should be made to a thorough analysis of the powers of nature, and at the same time such unpardonable neglect displayed of questions of purely physiological and psychological character, an astounding phenomena rejected without either examination or appeal, is an exhibition of inconsistency strongly savoring of timidity, if not the moral obliquity. If, therefore, we should ever receive from some contemporaneous Faraday the same fling that gentleman made years since, when with more sincerity than good breeding he said that many dogs have the power of coming to much more logical conclusions than some spiritualist, we fear we must still persist. Abuse is not argument, least of all proof, because such men as Huxley and Tyndale denominate spiritualism a degrading belief and Oriental magic jugglery. They cannot thereby take from truth its verity. Skepticism, whether it proceeds from a scientific or an ignorant brain, is unable to overturn the immortality of our souls. If such immortality is a fact, and plunge them into post-mortem annihilation. Reason is subject to error, says Aristotle. So is opinion, and the personal views of the most learned philosopher are often more liable to be proved erroneous than the plain common sense of his own illiterate cook. In the tales of the impious Caliph Barachias Hassan Aglu, the Arabian sage holds a wise discourse. Beware, O my son, of self-incense. He says, it is the most dangerous on account of its agreeable intoxication. Profit by thy own wisdom, but learn to respect the wisdom of thy fathers alike. And remember, O my beloved, that the light of Allah's truth will often penetrate much easier an empty head than one that is so crammed with learning that many a silvery ray is crowded out for want of space. Such is the case with our overwise Kadi. These representatives of modern science in both hemispheres seems never to have exhibited more scorn or to have felt more bitterly towards the unsolvable mystery than since Mr. Crooks began the investigation of the phenomena in London. This courageous gentleman was the first to introduce to the public one of those alleged materialized sentries that guard the forbidden gates. Following after him, several other learned members of the scientific body had the rare integrity combined with the degree of courage which, in view of the unpopularity of the subject, may be deemed heroic, to take the phenomena in hand. But alas, although the spirit indeed was willing, the mortal flesh proved weak. Ridicule was more than the majority of them could bear, and so the heaviest burden was thrown upon the shoulders of Mr. Crooks. An account of the benefit this gentleman reaped from his disinterested investigations and the thanks he received from his own brother scientists can be found in his 3 pamphlets entitled Researches in the Phenomena of Spiritualism. After a while, the members appointed on the committee of the Dielectric Society and Mr. Crooks, who had applied to his mediums the most crucial tests, were forced by an impatient public to report in so many plain words what they had seen. But what could they say except the truth? Thus, they were compelled to acknowledge first that the phenomena which they at least had witnessed were genuine and impossible to simulate, thus showing that manifestations produced by some unknown force could and did happen. That whether the phenomena was produced by disembodied spirits or other analogous entities, they could not tell, but that manifestations thoroughly upsetting many preconceived theories as to natural laws did happen and were undeniable. Several of these occurred in their own families. And third, that notwithstanding all their combined efforts to the contrary, beyond the indisputable fact of the reality of phenomena, glimpses of natural action, not yet reduced to law, they, to borrow the expression of the Count de Gabalis, could make neither head nor tail of it. Now, this was precisely what a skeptical public had not bargained for. The discomfiture of the believers in spiritualism had been impatiently anticipated before the conclusions of Messrs. And Crooks and Varley and the Dielectric Society were announced. Such a confession on the part of their brother scientists humiliated, for the pride of even those who had timorously abstained from investigation. It was regarded as really too much that such vulgar and repulsive manifestations of phenomena, which had always, by common consent of educated people, been regarded as nursery tales, fit only to amuse historical servant girls and afford revenue to professional somnambulists, that manifestations which had been consigned by the Academy and Institute of Paris to oblivion should so impertinently elude detection at the hand of experts in physical sciences. A tornado of indignation followed the confession. Mr. Crooks depicts it in his pamphlet on psychic force. He heads it very pointedly with the quotation from Galvani: "I am attacked by 2 very opposite sects, the scientists and the know-nothings. Yet I know that I have discovered one of the greatest forces in nature," he then proceeds. "It was taken for granted that the results of my experience would be in accordance with their preconceptions. What they really desired was not the truth, but an additional witness in favor of their own foregone conclusions. When they found the facts which that investigation established could not be made to fit those opinions, why, so much the worse for the facts. They try to creep out of their own confident recommendations of the inquiry by declaring that Mr. Home is a clever conjurer who has duped us all. Mr. Crooks might, with equal propriety, examine the performance of an Indian juggler. Mr. Crooks must get better witnesses before he can be believed. The thing is too absurd to be treated seriously. It is impossible and therefore can't be. I never said it was impossible. I only said it was true. The observers have all been biologized and fancy they saw things occur which really never took place, etc., etc., etc. After expending their energy on such puerile theories as unconscious cerebration, involuntary muscular contraction, and the sublimely ridiculous one of the cracking knee joints, les muscle craqueur, after meeting ignominious failures by the obstinate survival of the new force, and finally, after every desperate effort to compass its obliteration, these fili diffidendi, as St. Paul calls their class, thought best to give up the whole thing in disgust, sacrificing their courageously persevering brethren as a holocaust on the altar of public opinion. They withdrew in dignified silence, leaving the arena of investigation to more fearless champions. These unlucky experimenters are not likely to ever enter it again. It is easier by far to deny the reality of such manifestations from a secure distance than find for them a proper place amongst the classes of natural phenomena accepted by exact science. And how can they, since all such phenomena pertain to psychology, and the latter, with its occult and mysterious powers, is a terra incognita for modern science, thus powerless to explain that which proceeds directly from the nature of the human soul itself, the existence of which most of them deny, unwilling at the same time to confess their ignorance. Scientists retaliate very unjustly on those who believe in the evidence of their senses without any pretense to science. A kick from thee, O Jupiter, is sweet, says the poet Tetriakowski in an old Russian tragedy. Rude as those Jupiters of science may be occasionally towards us, credulous mortals, their vast learning in less abstruse questions, we mean, if not their manners, entitles them to public respect. But unfortunately, it is not the gods who shout the loudest. The eloquent Tertullian, speaking of Satan and his imps, whom he accuses of ever mimicking the Creator's work, denominates them the monkeys of God. It is fortunate for the philosophicules that we have no modern Tertullian to consign them to an immortality of contempt as the monkeys of science. But return to genuine scientists, phenomena of a merely objective character, says A.N. Aksakoff, force themselves upon the representatives of exact sciences for investigation and explanation. But the high priest of science, in the face of apparently such a simple question, are totally disconcerted. This subject seems to have the privilege of forcing them to betray not only the highest code of morality, truth, but also the supreme law of science, experiment. They feel that there is something too serious underlying it. The cases of Hare, Crookes, De Morgan, Varley, Wallace, and Butleroff create a panic. They fear that as soon as they concede one step, they will have to yield the whole ground. Time-honored principles, the contemplative speculations of a whole life of a long line of generations are all staked on a single card. In the face of such experience as that of Crookes and the dialectic society of Wallace and the late Professor Hare, what can we expect from our luminaries of erudition? Their attitude towards the undeniable phenomena is in itself another phenomena. It is simply incomprehensible, unless we admit the possibility of another psychological disease, as mysterious and contagious as hydrophobia. Although we claim no honor for this new discovery, we nevertheless propose to recognize it under the name of scientific psychophobia. And so you can see that this phobia mindset has been going on. We have what? We now have Trent derangement syndrome. It's the same kind of concept. If we can't get truth to be what we want it to, we label it as something bad. Dear friends, whether you recognize it or understand any of this or not, I don't know, is really the important point. But the important point is that you recognize that there is a force, an unknowable force even. He's not a man sitting on a throne. It is a power that created. And it created through thought and mind. And we are part of that. And when you begin to understand that that is the important thing, it's not about what mystical thing that somebody can tell you should have and you spend the next 10 years trying to have one. It's about you finding out who you really are. That's what this journey for truth is about. Because I promise you, if you go long enough and if you do the right drugs, inevitably you will have a color visitation, okay? Or what other manifestation you deem to be supernatural. You still haven't accomplished anything. The accomplishing of the purpose to find truth should really balance on one thing and one thing alone. Who am I? You know, I showed you guys a few months ago, and I'm quite sure that the mass majority of people didn't really get what I was talking about. It seemed like anyways. But I read a simple statement to you, and it got glossed over by most, forgotten by most. But I asked a simple question, which Moses, standing on a mountain, all by himself in silence, asked the force. And he asked this simple question: who am I? Maybe you didn't understand that, and maybe none of us truly understood that. If your picture of who you are is about the physical body and the ego, then I'm sure you've already found your answer. You need only go look in the mirror, and you have found who you are. On the other side, if you full well know, without anybody ever telling you, without ever seeing, by intuition, that you are something more, then you're on the path that I'm on. The phenomena that everybody is searching for and nobody's finding are not finding it because they're searching for the wrong thing. It's only when you begin to understand who you truly are, when you begin to understand who you truly are, that any of that will manifest anyways. So what one of the Bible writers uses a statement, and it's very appropriate right here. He said, a wicked and a perverse generation seeks after a sign, but I tell you the truth, there will be no sign given to them. No sign given to them. Because the inner knowing of who I am doesn't need a sign. And so as time goes on and as you watch what happens with humans, you're going to notice that all of the woo-woo nonsense is going to begin to fall away. It's going to burn off and blow away like the dust. And there will be nothing left that remains of it. I hope that you're asking the right question. I hope that your heart's desire is the right question. And so she said they ought to have learned by this time in the school of bitter experience that they can rely on the self-sufficiency of the positive sciences only to a certain point, and that so long as there remains one single unexplained mystery in nature, the word impossible is a dangerous word for them to pronounce. In the researches on the phenomena of spiritualism, Mr. Crook submitted to the option of the reader 8 theories. The account for the phenomena observed, these theories run as follow. First theory: the phenomena are all the result of tricks, clever mechanical arrangements, or legerdemain. The mediums are imposters, and the rest of the company are fools. And just so you know, many of you were brought up in households and in churches, and that was the prevailing perception. So if you resonate with that one, you may need to stop and pause yourself and ask yourself, am I resonating with this in familiarity, or am I resonating with this in a deeper resonation? See, understand that one of the hardest things for humans is to unlearn what's learned. And you've been your whole life programmed that certain things are real and they can never be changed, modified, or deviated from. That's how you are controlled. That was created, established, put in place by spirit forces outside of our realm who have been controlling humans for over 300,000 years. It's not new. It's very old. I'm sorrowful that none of us were gifted or had the opportunity to recognize that, and many of us got to waste most of our life, but I promise you it wasn't a waste, because you couldn't have handled what's coming in the future if you hadn't have been where you've been to get here. And so the second theory goes like this: the persons at a seance are the victims of a sort of mania. You remember the one, if you've ever seen the movie Reefer Madness, you notice how that they painted a scientific mania. And in mania, when they really say that, most of the time the concept is really more madness. You have become mad in your mind. It's a mania. And so the persons at a seance are the victim of some sort of mania. So in other words, something is causing them to go mad in their minds. Or delusion, which we will see a lot of before this is over, delusion and illusion, because you will find that your illusion is a delusion. And imagine phenomena to occur which have no real objective existence. So it's all just you are somehow you get freaked out in your mind. You went on an acid trip and you saw all kinds of things, and that's what you came back and said that's what you saw. And the third theory, of course, the federal government knows that that's true. That's why they played so much in the 60s with LSD. And the third theory, the whole is the result of conscious or unconscious cerebral action. So in other words, you created it in your mind, whether intentional or it just happened. Fourth theory, the result of the spirit of the medium, perhaps in association with the spirits of some or all of the people present. So now the medium is some really strong mental thing and put some mental hex on you and put you under a spell, and because of that you saw this stuff. And then the fifth theory is the actions of evil spirits or devils. That's the one that I was always programmed to out of the Bible, that the whole concept, although Samuel is called back by a soothsayer that existed in Israel when soothsayers weren't supposed to exist, it would make you wonder, why would they allow a soothsayer if it was so illegal for a soothsayer to exist? And even more so, King Saul going to the soothsayer was like the President of the United States going to see Edgar Cayce, but you're told and programmed and trained to believe that somehow it's the most horrible, evil thing that could happen. And so the result of the spirit of the medium, my spirit, fifth, the actions of evil spirits or devils, personifying whom or what they please in order to undermine Christianity and ruins men's souls. And this is the theory of our theologian. It certainly was the theory of every theologian that I ever met. Every pastor, every bishop, every district leader. One of them that I knew that was very prominent in the Southwest Texas district area. He's the only man I've ever seen for being supposedly as elevated as he was, who could walk in a room and 90% of what he saw was demonic. And I always used to ponder that because I go, well, I'm kind of a pretty intuitive guy and I speak a lot of things that come from the other realm, and I felt no negativity, and I'm pretty sensitive about feeling negative energies and always have been. I didn't realize it. I didn't know how to function with it, but I do, and I'm even more so as I go forward, even more so coming from people, more than inanimate objects hanging on a wall. If he deemed a picture to be demonically inspired, they took the picture down and painted the wall, simply because he told them that that was demonically inspired. Saw lots of that stuff, actually. And so the sixth theory, the actions of a separate order of beings living on this earth, but invisible and immaterial to us, able, however, occasionally to manifest their presence, known in almost all countries and ages as demons, though not necessarily bad. Gnomes and fairies and kobolds and elves and goblins and puck and etc. One of the claims of the Kabbalist. In the seventh theory, the actions of departed human beings, the spiritual theory par excellence. In the eighth theory, the psychic force, an adjunct to the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh theories. The first of these theories having been proved valid only in exceptional, though unfortunately still too frequent cases, must be ruled out as having no material bearing upon the phenomena themselves. Theories, the second and the third, are the last crumbling entrenchments of the guerrillas, skeptics, and materialists, and remain, as lawyers say, ad hoc sub judice licest. Thus, we can deal in this work but with the four remaining ones, the last eighth theory being, according to Mr. Crook's opinion, but a necessary adjunct of the others. And so we've gone on pretty good. I don't know if you're starting to maybe get a little, because we've kind of gotten out of the front. It's been quite amazing for me, because I've been wondering for most of my religious life why I never see amongst people who are supposed to be so spiritual. And so I understand if you come along and you were born in baptism, or you were born in some other religion, what I would say the lesser spiritual ones. But alas, it wasn't accidental that I was born into a Pentecostal arena, one of which had a grandfather who did function in spirit realm. He certainly was anything but demonic, and he certainly didn't believe in any, and he was anything but prideful. In fact, he was a quite humble guy who the force, chose to work through and help some people in Austin, Texas. And many of you, though, were born into Pentecostalism that I know, and you lived it your whole life, and you saw a lot of shaking and rattling and rolling. And that was at some levels the epitome of all the spiritual manifestation that you ever saw, was somebody dance like a chicken and then fall on the ground and shake. And it's quite saddening that there is an opportunity for us as humans to come to a place, if we will, and I don't even say most will, because I don't think most will. I think there's a lot of tire kickers out there. They'd like to find out if it's easy for them to learn this so they can do some of it or something. But as far as the purpose why Source puts people here, may not be their main goal. And I have to leave that, of course, to them. He will take care of that. It's not my problem. But to be sure, there was a purpose for all of us who are true light to be here. And Yeshua summed all of that up in just a few statements. But the main purpose, the overarching purpose, was that we show others around us the light, that we guide others to the light, that we help other people explore or encounter the light. And I've heard pieces of that my whole life, and it's always come down to the light being something, but nobody really knew what it was. It's just that was something, the words that you say, the light. There was no knowledge. I never heard one time any preacher ever in 60 years of Christianity, I never one time heard somebody even voice the reality of the light that we are. And so I think that if you hear and if you understand the things that I'm saying as much as the things that I'm not saying, then you already, I would suspect, are starting to recognize that there is a very special place where humans can exist and can do amazing, wonderful work for the universe. And that place, my friend, resides inside you. So I would say to you tonight, namaste. I hope you will take this. I hope you will ponder that. If you've been one of those who've wondered all your life why people didn't get healed when they got prayed for, and why there seemed to be so much failure, then by all means, I hope that you'll come and go along. I believe that we're going to see things as the Bible tells us, that God would show us great and mighty things that we know not of. And so, shalom to each and every one of you. The future is certainly brighter than the past has been. Shalom.